Hi everyone, welcome back to Box Delights. I've got some great solo games coming up on the channel, but before we head into those and start some new series, I did want to just check in and show you what I've been playing recently. I've been playing KeyForge. This is the new 2-player starter set, Age of Ascension, and it's a great way to get into the game, so I figured I'd show it off to you. There was another starter set, and it was for the first series, the Call of the Archons. I'm going to show you. These are some of the little packs that I picked up. The good thing about this starter set is it comes with 2 random decks, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and it comes with all the tokens that you need for the game. In the first starter set, the Call of the Archons starter set, some of these tokens were represented by cards, but these tokens work much better. And also, having 2 ready to play random decks in a starter set gives you the KeyForge experience, because that's the USP, that's the unique selling point about this game, is that every deck is unique. Here's 3 more decks that you can pick up. So these are like your boosters, but they're not expansions. You don't add them, okay? It's not a trading card game. You don't buy a bunch of cards and construct a new deck from them. Every deck is ready to play, and you can't mix and match, right? And we'll show you this in a moment. So this is a 2-player card game, the ilk of Magic the Gathering. It's designed by Richard Garfield. There's a new starter deck coming in 2019, so very soon, called Worlds Collide. It's going to introduce 2 new houses and 284 new cards entering into the card pool. The good thing about these is that they don't supersede each other, so you can play a game of Archons versus Ascension and Worlds Collide as well. If there's one downside to the starter set, you get a rule, I'm not going to say rule book, but rule sheet. And as in these card games, different cards have different abilities, right, and skills and concepts. And the rules sheet will explain what each of them mean. But of course, if you only get the Age of Ascension starter deck, you'll get this rule sheet, and it'll only give you the abilities that come in that card pool. So I bought, for example, some of the Archons decks, and there's keywords on there which aren't explained in the Ascension rulebook. But that's okay, just go online, right? In this day and age, I think we're all happy with the idea of having to go look stuff up online. And you can go to Fantasy Flight website, and you can get a full rule set that you can download with it, all the keywords explained for each of the different sets of cards, and hopefully we'll have the same for Worlds Collide. Now likewise, you may say, well, I don't really need the starter set, because you can go and buy these packs and you can proxy in the tokens. What you're getting here is the tokens, and you're getting these playmats as well, and these are great. We've not been using them, but they're only paper, but it's a good way to introduce yourself to the game and have somewhere to play the game out. Right, it's a little bonus. We don't use them, but you may like them. So what's the game about? Let's have a look, and I'll explain to you how this game plays. The aim of the game in KeyForge is to forge 3 keys. The moment a player forges a 3rd key, they immediately win the game. 2-player game, you're playing back and forth. At the start of your turn, if you have 6 amber, then you must forge a key. Okay, flip one of these over. You can only do that once per turn. Once you've established whether you can forge a key, that's the start of your turn, you then come to the main part of your turn, which is playing cards from your hand. Now each deck that you play with, let's have a look at one of my starter decks that came with my game. Each deck that you have is unique. It has a unique back. Actually, let's compare with another. This is the 2nd deck. And you can see a unique card back. And yes, these cards are generated procedurally. This is your house card, and on the reverse is a card list. This one's called the Ringleader Mousecan, the Dramatic Queen, and here Rayaby Altman, the grass and compact. So they're very random names. And the idea of this procedural algorithm that creates these decks is that it's creating a roughly balanced deck. So you can take any deck and play it against another. Now, in truth and in practice, some decks are stronger and some weaker than others. So that's where the luck part of this game comes in. You can be good and draw a really good deck, unlucky, draw a bad deck. But what's good and bad is also a little bit subjective because it depends on what you like to play. Different houses, each deck is comprised of 3 houses, has different strengths and different weaknesses. For example, Brobnar is very offensive with lots of big creatures, and Logos is more supportive, helping you draw more cards. And this leads us to the next phase of the game. The next phase is to choose your house. Each deck comprises of 3 houses, and for this turn, you have to choose one of the 3 houses to play with. You can't play with more than 1 house per turn, but from turn to turn you can switch. So in this deck we have Lagos, Untamed and Shadows. And in this deck we have Sanctum, Brobnar and Shadows. Once you've chosen your house, then you can play cards from your deck for that house. Okay, and in the top left hand corner you can see the house icon. Right, so this is a Shadows card, this is a Brobnar card, okay, this is a Sanctum card. Right, play a series of cards. One thing about this game is there's no cost to playing these cards. Right, you know, like in Magic the Gathering you have to play land, alright, to pay the cost. In this game you can play as many cards as you wish from your hand that match the house that you've chosen to play that turn. Now that feels already pretty unique, pretty subtle, because what's going to happen is as your hand fills up with cards, so here I can see I've got 4 cards from Brobnar, I might choose that as my house and play all of those cards, and then I'm going to refresh my hand, draw some more cards, and this time I may choose Shadows. Okay, I've got 3 Shadows cards, but it's not just about playing cards, it's about using the abilities of cards that you've already played on a previous turn, alright, attacking with them, or using their reap. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. That's reap is the way that you get amber, which allows you to forge keys. Okay, you can't use cards or play cards for a house that you've not declared this turn. So you've got a choice. At every turn, it's this huge tactical decision. Do I declare Brobnar here? Do I declare a house that I've got lots of cards in play already that I can then attack and reap with and use abilities of? Or do I choose a house that I've got lots in my hand so I can get more cards out? And that's the constant decisions that you have to make back and forth that determine how you play your deck. And like I say, different houses, different decks will have a different feel to them. And you're going to have to learn to play your deck properly. Do you have a deck with lots of large creatures, a Brobnar or Sanctum deck? Or do you have a deck that is more about manipulating cards and controlling the board and doing card draw, ember draw with the Shadows and Logos houses? Or maybe you've got a balanced deck that's got a mixture of those kinds of houses. But you've got to learn. You've got to learn about your deck and how to play it. My son and I have been playing with a couple of decks. I'll show you them, and they play very, very differently from each other. Yeah, this one is called Marrakesh Spawn of Oakenbeast. This is a Shadows, Mars and Sanctum deck. It doesn't have big creatures, it doesn't, but it's got a couple of key cards. Glorious View. For each creature your opponent controls in excess of you, gain 1 amber. So this is about actually having few creatures and letting your opponent build a massive force, and then playing out Glorious View and collecting tons of amber that you can then quickly forge keys with. There's another card in here. And this is all about stealing. Bad Penny is a kind of an iconic card. There's cards like Mantle of the Zealot here. This creature gains, you may use this creature as if it belonged to the active house. Here we go, Poison Wave. Deal 2 damage to each creature. It's a good way of knocking out a lot of creatures. So you can pull lots of amber, destroy their battle line, and then play a card like Key Abduction. to quickly forge a key out of the normal phase order. So this is kind of a control, a very subtle deck, very difficult to play. I still haven't got it down, and I was losing quite a lot with it. Versus something like this deck. Yeah, this one's called the Ripped Mare, and this is a Brobnar Shadows and Lagos deck. This is very creature heavy. Okay, lots of Brobnar. It's all about just playing tons and tons of creatures. So these two were kind of at odds with each other. This deck was winning a lot because this one depended on getting the right cards at the right time. But a recommended way of playing this game is called adaptive mode, and this is what I would suggest, because then it doesn't matter if you find one, you know, I'm playing this and I'm not winning with it, and my son was winning with the Ripped Mare quite a lot. With adaptive mode, what you do is you bring your deck to the table and you play a game, and then you switch. Okay, and then you play again. Okay, so it's 2 games, and then you have a third game, and in the third game, so it ends up being best of 3. You bid. You bid for the deck that you want to play, and you bid with chains, and I'm going to talk about chains as we get into the rules. This is how you track chains. Chains is a way of kind of introducing a little handicap for one of the players. So the more chains you bid, the more chains you start the game with, and what it does is it slows down your play. And this is a great idea that KeyForge has its built-in balancing mechanism that you can use in adaptive mode by bidding chains. If you think one deck is stronger than the other, bid with this balancing method. Okay, it slows down the stronger deck, what's perceived to be the stronger deck. And so players will naturally decide between them, how many chains do I think it's worth to have what I feel is the stronger deck. Of course, if both players decide that they want different decks because they think that's the stronger deck, then go ahead and play and knock yourselves out and let the victory speak for itself. But if both players think this is the stronger deck, you can both bid for it until one player feels that they've got enough advantage that they can go for the weaker deck and win because of that balancing mechanism. Right? It's a neat little idea, kind of like handicapping in golf, right? So the players feel that they're on a level playing field. All right, so that's adaptive mode, best of 3. And of course you can play this as often as you want, really. And the idea then is it's less about the strength of the deck and more about the player's skill and how well they can play that deck. And that kind of brings me neatly onto the next phase of the game. So step 1 was forging keys if you can. Step 2, choose your house. Step 3, play your cards. Step 4 is then to refresh any cards. So cards will exhaust when you're using them to attack, to reap, use their abilities and so on. Refresh your cards and then draw back up. Okay, is the final step of your turn. And what chains say is draw fewer cards. So if I've got 10 chains, I take, it says -2 over to the right, I take 2 fewer cards than I would normally. All right, and then there's steps down, and it'll step down and step down, and then when it's into the 6th spot, I would only take 1 less card. Okay, and tick this down. So after, let's say I start with 6 chains, for the first 6 turns I'll be taking 1 less card until this drops off the bottom. So that's what you're bidding with. Alright, so you can bid chains, and it'll just mean you'll be drawing fewer cards and having fewer cards to play with each turn until this is ticked down. There are card abilities that add chains as well. So if there's a particularly strong card, it might add a chain to just slow you down for the next turn. So that's your chaining. So now we've got the basic structure of the game down. See, it's not tricky, and we've seen how these cards decks are all randomly generated. To see different card backs, and every deck that you pull will be unique. But you're not feeling like you're missing out. Like I said, because of this natural balancing mechanism, and because you're just trying to find a deck that suits you, and I've got quite a few, and I've found some nice decks that suit me. These packs do come sealed. Well, let's have a look at one of these actually, and I'll talk about with a deck list. So here's a box that's unbroken. So I've got one complaint. They come like this, shrinked, right? You can see the deck list once you've opened it. So I've not opened this one. 0, the Silently Stalwart. But once you've broken the box, it's kind of broken. And then obviously there's nothing on the outside of the box to suggest what's in it. So I'm still looking for a decent storage solution for storing my decks and understanding what's in where. But, okay, this doesn't have a great many different icons. We'll have a look at that in a minute. But what I'd like to show you, within each deck, there's certain cards will be of certain rarities. So how many decks will they feature in? So this icon here is a circle next to Coward's End. So this card is quite common. Then you have cards like Smith with a diamond. This is an uncommon card. Then you have cards with stars next to them, like the War Grumpus here, he's a star. This is a rare card. And then you have specials. Specials are like rare cards, but because this thing's generated procedurally, there's a bunch of cards that kind of always go together as a little set, like the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. You always get 4 together. Okay, the 4 Horsemen come together, they're special cards. Now in this deck, we have some special cards. We've got the Brobnar Ambassador and the Shadows Ambassador as specials. They have this kind of diamond with a dot in the middle. Here's the 2 ambassadors. Now they come together in a special way because of the abilities on them. This one says fight, you may play or use a Brobnar card. This one says you may play or use a Shadows card. Now these will be no good. These belong to the Sanctum house. These will be no good unless the deck that you're playing had Shadows and Brobnar in it. So they're special because this is a Sanctum Brobnar Shadows deck. Okay, they only fit in this deck. So the procedural algorithm that randomly generates a deck will have some heuristics in it because there's certain cards that need to be together with other cards, right? And that's what this special is all about. It's saying that it's not been generated randomly using common, uncommon, rare, but a special algorithm has inserted these into this deck. Hopefully that makes sense. There's another type of rarity which I don't have any of, so I can't show you, called Mavericks. Every card belongs to a house, right? So this Groggins card here belongs to Brobnar. But there are certain Mavericks. You may have a Maverick Groggins, which says, I'm not Brobnar, but I belong to Shadows. And that would be like an extremely rare version, a rare card, where a card is in a house it doesn't normally belong in. And that will kind of make that deck feel a little more unique. Because decks are made of a fixed card pool, these Mavericks kind of throw that out. They're a card that doesn't belong in the card pool, if you like. It's something that's just extremely rare. I think someone's figured it out to be like 1 in 25 decks will have a Maverick. So quite rare in the scheme of things. And if you're interested, you can, using this little code here, you can use an app to register your deck and then kind of keep a catalogue online of your wins and losses. And that goes into a database of registered decks and how they're performing. And it's a great way, I guess, for the devs to get some feedback and for you to develop your understanding of the game. Should we set up and play and see how this works? And why don't we also just break open our sealed deck and let's just have a look and see. So this one's called Zero the Silent Stalwart. Lovely. I'll have a look at this deck. So this is Shadows, Untamed and Mars. And it's got a rare Mars called... It would be something I couldn't pronounce. Let's have a look at this. This Stim Rager. Deal 2 damage to a creature and move it to either flank of its controller's battle line. So a battle line is where you're going to deploy your creatures. Okay. And another USP about KeyForge, or something that sets it apart from something like Magic, is that when you create your battle line, when you deploy your creatures, where you put them is significant. So flanks are either ends of your battle line. And also different creatures have different abilities based on who's to the left of it and who's to the right of it. So it might give maybe a shield to the player, to the creatures on either side, or a +1 bonus to attack to creatures on the left or creatures on the right, that kind of stuff. So this is kind of positional play, and that part of it I really like as well, because it adds to the decision making that you have to make. Bad Pennies is a card that we'll see quite a lot in Shadows. It's a common. But do we have any rares? We do. We have Key of Darkness and Routine Job. Let's have a look at those. So there's Routine Job. It says steal an amber, then steal 1 amber for each copy of Routine Job in your discard pile. Okay, so you could potentially be stealing 2. There's only 2 Routine Jobs. And Key of Darkness. Forge a key at +6 the usual cost. If your opponent has no amber, forge a key at +2 the current cost instead. Why would you want to do that? Because the only time you can forge keys, remember, is at the start of your turn. First 1 to 3. Let's say the game's in the balance a little bit, and you've got 2, your opponent's got 2. Whoever forges the next key is going to win. Rather than wait for the start of your next turn, something like Key of Darkness will help you at a little bit extra cost steal that victory before your opponent can. If they're sitting with 6 amber ready to win the game at the start of their next turn, something like Key of Darkness can save you. And then what other rares have we got in here? We've got Pose Pixies and the World Tree under Untamed. So here's the World Tree. Return a creature from your discard pile to the top of your deck. That's called a location card. This is an artifact. So this is something that goes into play and has an action on it. So as an action, you exhaust it, and every turn you can then be pulling cards back from your discard pile. So there's different types of cards. We've got artifacts. I've been talking about creatures. And you've got action cards, which you just play and they do their thing and then they go into their discard piles. This one's called Mimicry. When you play this card, treat it as a copy of an action card in your opponent's discard pile. You start stealing what your opponent does. Nice. So creatures, actions, artifacts. Some more actions. Routine Job is an action. Key of Darkness is an action. Hideaway Hole is an artifact. And then here we've got an upgrade. This one's called Bone Rot Venom. After this creature is used, deal 2 damage to it. So this one is something that you can play on a creature, and here we go. It's something you can either play it on your creatures or an opponent's creature, and this one is going to kind of rot an opponent's creature. Right, so those are the different kind of cards, and hopefully a sample of the different artwork that you'll see. Right, so that's KeyForge. If you want to keep watching, I'll show you how the game plays.